Welcome to the No Negations Podcast, a faith-based podcast that connects real-world situations and thoughts to scriptures to strengthen you. On this episode, we're sitting down with Mr. Waymon Crump and Mr. Randy Campbell. So let's dive into it. What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the No Negations Podcast. Darrell Dee Sullins Jr. is here.
Ayla Sullins.
And DS Ninja is in the house.
Ooh, I was slow with the camera switching. Ayla, just say your name again.
Ayla Sullins.
There you go. And then, Dad, you got to make it right.
And DS Ninja is in the house.
And we have two special guests, Mr. Crump and Mr. Campbell, sitting here on the gray couch with, well, Mr. Crump is technically in the brown chair, and on the gray couch with us. How are you guys feeling today?
Good.
Good.
Mr. Crump, we have you on here before.
Yes,
You're
sir.
not a...
Yes, sir. I'm not a newbie.
So before we get started, we always talk about how our weeks went. And so, Ayla, you usually go first, right? Yeah. Ayla, how was your week?
I don't remember.
I don't remember. I think it was good. I had nothing to complain about.
Mm-hmm.
I feel, blessed. Great. That's what I've got.
That
My week was good. Busy as usual. I'm getting more in tune with the technology, working on the computer and the website.
he actually uploaded a video onto YouTube by himself.
I did. I did. I didn't mean to.
Yeah. Let's say, wasn't it on
But I
accident?
did it. I thought it was going on my website, but it went on YouTube. But that's really an advancement for
But
me.
this is the question, though. Could you do it again?
Look, man, don't put me out there.
I take that as a no.
I probably could.
My week.
Oh, you don't remember?
No, my week was good. It was very busy. I did a lot of work today, or this week.
You did.
Like, we were like doing stuff to our yard. So I actually really like landscaping and cutting grass now. Like, I feel like my favorite store might be Lowe's. I spent a lot of time in Lowe's, so we was cutting the grass. We're putting in raised garden beds because we're growing our own vegetables and stuff now, and then we're about to get some chickens.
The prices to make you do that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw somewhere that said that by the end of the year, the cost for a carton of eggs could be around $12. I was like, oh, Ayla, we can get some chicken. Yeah. So, Mr. Crump, how was your week?
It was good. I am in the process of redoing my kitchen, so I really understand the cliche when it says sweat equity. I now know what that really means.
So, Mr. Campbell, like, I've known you my whole life, but for whatever reason, your name on the video thing came up as Raymond, and it makes me want to say Raymond, and I don't know why. But
I'm not sure. And it's Randy Campbell Sr.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
That's about right, because I was texting him, and he was like, "Hey, what time to come on?" This and that. I was like, "Well, I text you this message." Mm-hmm. He said, "I don't have no idea whose number that is."
So somebody's going to show up. Like,
Yeah.
"Hey, I'm on the podcast."
oh, wait, so you sent it to the wrong number?
I had 3 numbers for him, and so
Probably RJ's.
yeah, maybe because I called you before,
Right.
And so I just text, and I didn't hear back from him. Then he texted, "Hey, what time we coming on?" I said, "Wait a minute, I sent that." And I said, "Is this your number?" He said, "I have no idea whose number that is."
That's funny. Well, Mr. Campbell, if this is actually who you are, how was your week?
Week was good. A lot of work. I work at UPS, so it was kind of busy this week. But other than that, it was good. Got to see my grandbabies yesterday. Yay!
It's funny because, like, ever since Ayla and I had this kid, my parents act totally
This
different.
This kid, that's so demeaning.
Since we had Dez, since we had Dez, my parents act totally different. Like, they're nice. And I I've never seen like they're helpful. Like I was the kid, right? If I wanted something, save up for it. This baby got everything that I was wishing for when I was in like middle school. They just giving it to him, and it just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, well, that's what happens when you get grandkids.
Totally different.
But to tell the truth, that's your mom.
So on this episode, this is actually a little bit different, and usually I have an idea on how to jump into each episode, but this one I don't know. Like this is hard. So we're kind of talking about grieving and grieving from like a spouse point of view, and so I don't know. Like I just think about one time a couple weeks ago, Ayla and I was in the kitchen and we were talking. And I was just looking at her, and I was looking at the baby. I was looking at her, and I was looking at the baby. I was like, dang, one day, like, we might be, like, one of us might be gone. I could not even imagine having to live life and just, you spend all this time with this person. You spend all the time with your kids or whatever, and then one day all that can just be done. And so I had no idea how to jump into this. And I wasn't able to go to the funerals, but my dad was telling me that you guys actually spoke at your spouse's funerals, and I can't imagine how was that process of preparing a eulogy or words of remembrance.
Let me say this before they jump in, is that recently I was listening to an interview with Tony Evans, and they asked him, they said, how are you now since your wife passed? And I remember both of you speaking at your wife's funeral, and I'm sitting there, and I was like, it was like you guys gave the eulogy, and I was thinking, I said, I don't know if I will be able to do that. And it really affected a lot of people, and it made you think how much precious time is. Absolutely. And so that's why I reached out to you guys, because I had some people who passed recently, and I know what you guys went through can be a blessing to somebody, and so that's why we wanted you guys to come on. And I know it's a tough thing to talk about, So,
Do you guys want us to jump in?
Yeah, because I literally I don't know how.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Well, for me, it was kind of a sudden thing with Javida.
Yeah.
She passed away unexpectedly. She was there one day, and then the next day she wasn't. And I came home and found her, and it was difficult. When I first came in, my mind was it was running all over the place. I didn't want to believe anything that was going on at the time. And I remember that night, I told the kids they all had to leave the house. Nobody could be there. And the reason was because I knew that my emotions were going to be all over the place. And that night, man, I went at God so hard. Man, I mean, I just yelled, I screamed. I said, wait a minute, like I'm one of your servants. Like, why would you do this to me like this? And he let me get it all out. And that was the good thing. He let me get it all out. And then he said, as we were going on, the day, I should go back. On that Wednesday, we had prayed together. So Javide and I and one of our friends had prayed together. And the prayer that I prayed for her that night, because she has health issues, I was praying for her to be healed. And that's what I asked. And I said, I would like you to heal Javide 100%. And then I said, no, I would like you to heal her better than 100%. And that night, he did heal her better than 100%. He said to me that night, he said, the only way that I could heal her better than 100% was to bring her home. And I was like, that still sucks, though.
Yeah.
Like you sucker punched me with this thing here. Like, so, there was a lot of emotion going on. But then at the same time, I had 3 kids, 2 grandbabies, her mother and father, and all those folks that were looking at me. And so he said, now you need to stand. And I want you to stand up and show people me working through you while you're going through this. So he said, you're going to put this on display. Not you, but me working through you on display.
So you don't have any regrets for that prayer?
No. Once he told me that, and I said, well, then God answers prayers.
Yeah.
Because he does. And he answered that prayer that I had put out there.
Yeah.
But it shows us, too, that we we should pray with expectation.
Yeah.
Pray with that we're going to that things are going to happen. So when you pray, you should be serious about those things that you're saying. So, yeah.
Well, for me, it wasn't sudden. My wife had contracted COPD years, I would say probably about 10 years ago, and so pretty much it fell in line with the medical profession said. She did great in the beginning, which the doctor said, her pulmonary doctor, and he says, boy, because she was actually keeping my grandchildren, which people still can't believe. It just showed me. That's why I said at the funeral she was my new hero, because she was doing things that you wasn't supposed to do with COPD. She was keeping infants and my oldest, and so because she basically utilized everything that she had, which was an encouragement to me for the future. So every, we call tragedies, has a lesson to be learned. But I understood, I lost my mother a few years ago. I lost my brother just recently, now my wife. Now I really, and each one is different. Each loss, because I never thought, when I lost my mother, but that's why the Bible says that. Paul said, this is a mystery. I consider you as one flesh. And I'm just sharing things that I did at the eulogy. But what was tough with the eulogy for me is that we were married for 44 years and we dated for 10. So I was 54 years, and the challenge for me, like, okay, what do I get up here? 54 years, how do I put that in encapsulated time?
Yeah.
And it's almost like, and I think I said it was a kind of unfair to try to do that, and then you just do the best you can, because you can't do it. You can't put all the, like you just mentioned, all the relationships and the things that you did together in one little short period of time. But as Randy said, the blessing was she wanted to see her grandchildren. I have 4, and she's seen all of them. God allowed her to see all of her grandchildren. And so you always look for how the grace of God, manifests himself in there. And so that was one thing that as you look back and reflect, you don't see it then, but as you reflect how the goodness of God, that he does always, he does love us. Now that didn't negate the part that he plays into real life, because he says that a man wants to die, so we're all going to leave here. It doesn't matter which way. But it is tough, and I think there's no way you can fill that hole. That it's a gaping hole that cannot be filled. And then people say time. It's, I don't know yet, because it's been so recently for both of us, so we can't even say time yet, because time is ongoing. So,
Waymon, I remember something that you said that really, really hit home. And when you were speaking, you spoke about the things that Paulette used to nag you about, and you said, it's funny how you miss those times. You wish you still had those times. At the time it was going in, and you said that that just remind you to take out the trash.
close the garage door.
Yeah.
Well, ironically enough, irony is that just this week, and I know Randy can speak on these things, just this week my dryer stopped working. And man, I don't want to buy a dryer. So I always try to remember how long have I had this dryer. Because I had this philosophy, when it's 12, you got to just get a new one. I don't want to be bothered. Because of a bad experience I had years ago where a guy came out and fixed it, and it broke again. But it wouldn't work, so I called Diamond, did some research on YouTube, and pretty narrowed it down to 2 things, the fuse and the heating element. Diamond came over and got an element. What come to find out, to make a long story short, it was a fuse. But the reason it blew was because of the lint filter that she used to do that I didn't. Nagging, I thought it was nagging at the time. Hey, you don't never clean this up. And it was so much stuff it was overheating,
Yeah.
and it popped the fuse. So that's just one example of the things I'm now experiencing that I consider. She used to say, "Yeah, I changed that lint," and I said, "Well, she had to remind me of that, right?" But that she did that religiously. I didn't. At least now I will from now on. So that's just one example of the things that you don't realize when you're married, of the things that are just going on every day that you sometimes take for granted. But, life.
And I was going to say for me, actually, I hadn't planned on speaking at all. And going through the week, I should say, at first I didn't plan on speaking. And then I said, well, I should do the eulogy. I said, so I had sat with the family. I said, I think I'm going to do your mom's eulogy, talking to the kids. And they were like, what? Like, why are you doing mom's eulogy? I said, because I know her better than anybody else. And they were like, and of course, Darrell says, well, I've known her longer than you have. And I was like, so I was like, okay.
Wait, that doesn't add up.
Well, when I met Javida, she had Darrell.
Right.
Okay.
She was already 14 months, so she did technically.
Yeah.
Longer than me, right? But I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to go ahead and do it. And so actually, I was just going to get up and just say a few words. And then the Spirit took over, and it was like, boom, like, it was almost like I say outer body, but it was just like I wasn't even talking. Like God was just telling me the words to say.
Yeah.
And he was saying that you have to say these things now because you have a captive audience, and you need to see, again, me working through you while you're standing up here. So the things that came out, actually, I had to go back and listen to it again because people kept telling me all the stuff that I was like, well, I did. I don't remember that. I don't remember. And I went back and listened to it. I was like, oh, okay. But that's what, so I hadn't even planned on doing it. But I think it's because I was more open and receptive to God just working through me. So, in my brokenness, I was a little bit more letting him come in and just take over and heal me through it. So I think that's why it worked out for me the way that it did. But yes, I can relate to those things they used to nag you about. Man, I wish he was here to nag me about this and nag me about that. Not necessarily nag me, but yeah, you miss those things.
So my question is how was that conversation with God after? Because I know like when bad things happen to me, I'm like, dang God, you really, but I haven't yet experienced that type of conversation yet. And I feel like that's totally different than like, oh, the gym flooded or dang, I stubbed my toe. Like it's a lot different than those. So how's that conversation with God after when you're like God, you have that thought process like God is doing the best for you?
Well, here's where the scriptures come in for me and studying for years that I have, that the answers, there's a mystery to God. But most of the things he's revealed. He's revealed it through narratives, through people in the Bible, through real life situations. So the way I look at when you lose someone, whether it's a spouse or someone, we're all going to leave here either by an accident, getting hit by a car, or an illness, or sometimes it's genetics. Your predisposition to in your family got heart disease. I remember Fix was a runner. He died in the heart because it was genetically encoded in his genes. So no matter what he ate or he that was going to happen to him. So when I look at illness, I look at three things. In my case with my wife, she smoked years ago. So she contracted COPD by smoking, a natural thing as a result of smoking. So when your person gets ill, the medical profession will diagnose it and it'll pretty much go that way. Number two is sometimes there's an exception where it doesn't go exactly that way. The third one is a miracle. I've seen two where the medical profession can't understand it. God totally comes in here. One is my sister, and the other one is Leonard Burt. Miracle. So that's why we continue to pray. We don't know exactly why God chose you. Not that they were any better than anyone else or, better, more spirit. But for whatever his reasons, my sister's aorta busted. at home.
Oh no, you don't come back from that.
She got to the hospital. When I went to see her, and I still apologize to her today, she had tubes coming out of every hole in her body. And the nurse was over there and says, not even 1% live. She's alive today. I don't think she's alive today. I talked to her yesterday. Miracle. So what I'm saying is we pray for whether it was genetics, whether the person was a causal factor, or whether whatever. Because God can miraculously heal. The mystery is we don't know why for that particular individual or the others. Most of the time, that doesn't happen, to be honest. It doesn't happen. Most of the time, the other two is that the person will leave here because of some illness, and sometimes they'll stay here longer, even with an illness. And then the third one is a miracle, which God does. And that's why the medical profession, they says, we don't know, and that's a testimony that people like that should have.
It's funny because we have conversations before when we in the Bible studies, and we talked about what's that one movie, The Earth.
Privileged Planet.
Privileged Planet, yeah, and when the scientists and doctors start talking about stuff, very rarely you hear them bring God into the equation. Right. And I think that is important for us as professing Christians in our Christian living to understand the way he moved, his premise, his promise, and keep our hope in him regardless of the outcome. And I know sometimes that's tough. That's tough to do.
Yeah, I know for me, you were asking about that conversation. Like I said, I went all over the gamut. I was crying, I was upset, I was happy, I was mad, I was angry. I went all over the way. But eventually, once I calmed down, and I just listened for his voice and let him start talking to me. And then he started talking to me. He started ministering to me throughout that time. Because Joanna had her own health issues that we were dealing with for 20-some years. Yeah. Nothing to the extent of Paulette, but she had her own things that she was dealing with. And, being a spouse who's taking care of a spouse as a caregiver, it's a lot harder a lot of times because they become your world. Like everything you wrap around them. So even in I've lost 2 sets of parents, I've lost brothers, sisters, all that. It was nothing compared to this because of the closeness that we had. Again, as Waymon said, for all the years, he was with Paulette for 54 years total, and Javada and I, we were together 30 years total. So that's a lot of time, and you spend close time in quarters with those people all the time. And so it is a different when you lose that. So then you get to see God though in a different light too. Yeah. And that's what happened with me is I saw him in a different light. He said there's a season for everything, Randy. Yeah. And he says that nobody leaves here before I tell them to. There's an appointed time for everybody. So, again, doctors can say, oh, they have this long to live, or, this is going to happen or something like that. But God is the one who says when it is time for us to actually leave here. He gave Javada 51 years plus, or however many days. And that's when her appointed time was. There wasn't anything that was going to change that. Sometimes people say, well, this person cheated death. You don't cheat death. Yeah. It is an appointed time. But for us as Christians, we know that because of the blood of Jesus, then that we have something to look forward to when we leave here, even though we still have that appointed time that this physical body is going to go and that our spirit's going to go. So, he began to talk to me, and he didn't give me a whole lot of scriptures. He just talked. He just talked, and he told me things, and he opened up my eyes to see things that I hadn't seen because I was so focused on her. And making sure she was good to go, being a good husband, being a good spouse, being a good parent. But he said I had to kind of move her out so that you could see me again, as opposed to you always having your concentration on her and you missing the things that I'm trying to give you. Now I'm going to carry you through this. And while I'm carrying you through this, then you'll see those things and the reason that I did what I did. And again, she's not in any more pain. She's, you know, she's feeling, she's got the new body. And I told her, when I get to heaven, I'm gonna chase you around with that new body. But it's that kind of thing that we joked about. We could always joke about, laugh. And those are the things that I'm sure Waymon and Paulette had. They had those things that nobody else shared with them. The good times and the not so good times, the really bad times when it was really tough. But it was the two of them and God together. Yeah. Three of us, you know, the three of us together. And that's what made that bond so strong, that made it even different than your parent when they pass, which again, it's a tough thing. A friend that passes or a sibling that passes, that spouse, especially, and again, if you're a caregiver for those spouses, you see some things that you go through, you know, you see them at their weakest moment, you know what I'm saying? And you know they're very vulnerable, and you begin to understand. You begin to understand how good God is, though, because He takes care of us all the time, regardless. I mean, even in their weakest moment, He's there taking care of them. You know, so that talk was tough. It was It went on all night.
I want to piggyback briefly on something Randy said was very important as part of this narrative, is that the caregiving part. And I've always said this, you try to tell young people, outside of your faith, if you get married, your spouse is the second most important thing you'll do in life.
Absolutely.
And this shows you why, because you talked about something happened, like you and lady, y'all so young now. Because that person has to be there for you. And it's not easy.
No.
It's not easy.
No.
Now your life totally shifts to it's them. It's taking care of them, and that's what love does. You just, it kind of reminds you, geez, you forgive yourself. It's not about you anymore. We say that as a cliche,
Right.
but now it's real. You're living it.
Yes.
You know, what do they need? You know, going to the hospital, making the appointments, and you know, she got to the point where she couldn't, you know, slowly progress. She couldn't walk and things like that, getting the thing. So when you pick a spouse or a spouse, that's why back in ancient time, they used to pick their spouse.
Yeah.
Right. You know what? You don't need Leroy.
Right.
You got to get up, because sometimes the parents, and I'm not advocating doing that, but I'm saying there was sometimes the parents seen things that you got starry eyes you didn't see.
Right.
Well, he's cute.
Exactly.
But when you get on your back, is he going to be there? You know.
Well, that's what they did with Saul.
Yeah.
You know, they wanted, he was tall, you know, warrior. They picked him,
Handsome.
but he was wretched. You know, and you guys said something, and we've talked about it on episodes before. But Karen and I, you know, this July it will be married 34 years.
Good.
And people often ask me, well, how do you do it? Young folks, how do you do it? I said, it's the bad times that glues you together. The things that you struggle and come out together on the other side. And there's so many people today willing to give up so quickly when a bump in the road comes, when something happens. They so quick to give up. And sometimes when you look at the grass on the other side, you get over there and find out it's AstroTurf. It ain't real, you know. And
hey, that was actually funny.
That was good.
So when you have what God put together, and you better check to make sure God has that person for you. Like you said, Waymon, you know, back in the day, they said, oh, he got a big afro, you know, all these superficial things, and he'll look good with me, make me, you know, that type of stuff. And to become a caregiver, you know, and I know what Karen had, her knee replacements and stuff, and like you said, vulnerable, you know.
And I think too, again, like with us being a little older, you know, when we saw that woman that we liked, we actually dated them. Like we went out, took them out on, like Javide and I, we first, I was in the Air Force when I first started talking to her. April 17th, 1991, I remember the day. I talked to her for 3 months before I ever saw her in person. But I knew by the end of that 3 months that was the woman I was going to marry, because we had spent all that time getting to know each other. Took the superficial level off, and we got to know each other. As a matter of fact, I ended up getting out of the military and coming home because I told my dad, that's the girl that I'm going to marry. But again, it's because you get to know that person, and then again, when you start to go through those tough times, you know that your best friend is right there with you, right beside you. Yes, God is our most important relationship. But our most important human relationship when we get married then becomes our spouse too. And then, of course, our kids come down, under that. But it's that you go through all those tough times and you come out together on the other side. And you're better for what you did together. This is where two or three are gathered in my name, I'm in the midst. Three-braided cord is not easily broken.
Right.
That was one of Javaita's favorite verses.
Yeah.
And she used to say that to us all the time. She's like, we're that kind of cord. We're that kind of cord because we have that connection together. Why? Because of everything that we went through over all those years that no one else went through with us.
So what is there any particular scriptures that you had to lean on, or any taking out special time to focus on any one thing for strength or comfort, because whenever somebody go through those things, you always hear the same stuff, call me if you need me, you need anything, this and that.
I'll bring you food.
Yeah, we heard that one too.
Yeah. But
Get a couple things.
But when everything is over, and I know I experienced that with people who passed in my family, when everything is over, the funeral and all that stuff, a few weeks later, that time, and I remember going to the store, and it was around the holiday times, and in the aisle, and the shortbread Christmas cookies, the red and the green one, and I just broke down because my mom always had that, So is there anything that you relied on, or any scripture that for comfort in those times of memory?
I know for me, it's because there's just RJ's at home now, and he's not there that much, so I'm in the house by myself a lot, right? So, and this actually just came about back in April. When Javaita passed, she had a room that she was in, and we had put everything into that room and closed the door. And so, this was a few months later in April. I'm opening up the windows in the house, right? And God started to talk to me. He said, go open that door. I said, why? He said, because you closed that door and you don't open it because you're still thinking she's coming back. And I was like, oh, man. So I opened up the door, started crying like crazy. Then he said, look around the house. He said, everything still has her imprint on it. I said, yeah, but if I take this down, then I'm going to forget her because I don't remember my mother as much as I used to. He said, no, you'll never forget her. He said, but what happens is you stay stuck in the past. You can't move forward because she has that there. And again, it's not a bad thing. He said, but you have to change it up some. He said, because when you walk in the house every day, the first thing you think about is her being on her Chase Lounge or something like that. Your kids don't come by as much. Why? Because when they walk in the house, the first thing they see the stuff. And I was like, man, he said, it's okay. He said, so take some of the stuff down. And I did. I took some of the stuff down, opened it up a little bit more, moved some furniture around and stuff. Totally different then. Totally different. So for me, he didn't really give me a whole lot of scriptures, even though he gave me some. But it was just those times when I was by myself. He and I just talked. And, I just gave him everything. This sucks, man. This really just sucks, man. I mean, I don't know if I can continue on like this, and he would be like, I'm right here, though. I'm going to help you through. Matter of fact, I'm going to walk with you while you go through this. See, sometimes God will carry us through things, and then other times he'll walk us through things. A lot of times when he's walking us through things, it's so that we can see everything. He can show us this over here, show us the lessons that we need to learn, so that then one, it glorifies him, of course, but it also then helps us for later on when we're doing something like this, where we want to talk to someone else and let them know God is still in control.
Yeah.
He still sits on the throne. He is still good, no matter how bad you think that situation is. Remember, God sent his only son for you. Think about that. And so, I always remember that, like, over and over again, like, he sent his only son for me. He sent his only, like, he just loves me that much. So I just have to continue to move forward. And when I can't, I allow him to help me move forward. So he'll give me the things that keep me moving forward. This podcast was one of those things. He's like, you need to go do that podcast. I was like, okay.
Do you feel like your relationship with God kind of, and this might sound bad, kind of like softened the blow of your spouse leaving? Because I know, like, it's after I found out that Miss Javida passed away, you were still posting your motivational things on Instagram. Like, I still see you, see both you guys active in the church and communicating. And Mr. Crump, you came over for the podcast after, and, like, I don't know, like, it just seemed different. And like, people who don't necessarily have God in their life, when tragedy happens, it's almost like they're about to jump off a cliff, it seems like. And, obviously, you're grieving, you're sad, you're hurt, but you're still hopeful. Do you feel like your relationship with God kind of helped you get through and go through this grieving process?
Yeah, and I think I mentioned this a little earlier. The scriptures, like James says, talked about maturity, to persevere. The example I always give is, like, if you ever met a bricklayer, a professional bricklayer, and you shake their hands,
Yeah.
it's like shaking steel. Right?
Yeah.
Where they catch bricks with their hand, but that came over time. The calluses are so hard. So when even through hard times and tragedy, you asked me first about the scripture, then I want to give another part B for this particular podcast. When some things the Bible gives us very uncomfortable, because I don't want hands that like steel.
Yeah.
But what it enables you to do is deal with life. So what God is saying, perseverance, because he knows we're all going to experience things in life. We don't know how they're coming. We don't know when they're coming, but we know they're coming. So you need to be mature so you can deal with them. That's where I get the analogy of the bricklayer. The other thing that helps me is, like, for me, and this is why this is, like, grieving and dealing with this is not universal for everyone. It's different. And but now we always wanted the kitchen done. So right now, I'm redoing the kitchen. So I'm the type of person, it doesn't take much for me to get, that's part of my personality. I can get into things. I can do things. I have a lot of interest. And sometimes my interest, I get too far on. But the thing that really helps me is, and this is for everyone that's married, you will only have the memories and you will only enjoy the good ones. You have to be intentional in making them. This is something people just don't do enough. I have hundreds of pictures when we traveled, when we went to Disney World, when we went to Niagara Falls, and I used to just, because at one time I was a junior flip photographer, and I just took pictures everywhere. People say, "Well, you take your camera." I took my camera. But what happens now, I got all those pictures. I got videos. So they said pictures are worth 1,000 words. That's why I showed the collage doing the thing, just giving people like a brief shot of, even when we was partying, we used to cabaret together, hot pants. But really, really, really nice to have. So the thing is, like, creating good times must be intentional. Exactly. You have to intentionally do that. You will fall into the quote of a rut when you're married for long periods of time. So someone has to say, no, we need to do this. We need to take some pictures. We need to, and when you see activities like with the grandkids and everything, take those pictures, because the memories is all you will have. Make good ones. Make good memories, because that's all you got.
And it's funny you said that, because Javida was a big picture taker. Even though I worked at the photo shop for 20 years, she was the one that took all the pictures. I mean, she has 2 phones that have like 15,000 pictures on them each. I'm like, oh my God. But you're right. Like, one of the things that we did as a family was we sat down and we started looking at those pictures when we were trying to make the collage up. And it just brought back so many memories, so much so that we went to her parents' house and they brought out pictures that we hadn't seen before of her. So it helped us through that process of being able to make those memories. But I agree with Waymon, is that you have to intentionally make those good moments. You know, you're always going to have bills. They're going to be there forever. You know, your boys, you can hang out with them whenever, but those memories that you make with your wife and your kids, those intentional memories, moments like that, you can't put a price tag on that. And when something like this does happen, then you have that to fall back on, because again, as you said, the memories are what's going to keep us going, you know, keep us moving forward as we go forward.
Do you guys have anything that you regret as a spouse that you've done? And
How much time you got? Ayla set up for that one.
No, I've been so quiet.
I know you have.
But this is so like emotional, and I'm just trying not to cry.
I see it on her face, because you know I got the cameras. I got the
Cry.
Yeah.
Go. I'm sorry, what was the question?
Oh,
Regrets.
yeah. Any regrets that as you as a spouse? Anything that you?
Well, I could say yes, I do. Obviously, there's some things I wish I had it done differently, but I don't really look at them as regrets. I look at them as lessons that I learned. Because when I first met Javida and I first said, I love you, I didn't know what I was saying. I thought I did. Over the years, though, as we went through all the things that we went through, the good things, the bad things, the things that I learned as being a husband, to be a godly man, and all those types of things, that's what helped us build our love for each other along the way. It's you know, they say love is never having to say you're sorry, but that's wrong. If you love somebody, you're going to say you're sorry, because you're going to hurt them at some point, and they're going to hurt you at some point. And so you have to be able to go back and apologize, say I'm sorry, ask for forgiveness, seek give forgiveness, and things like that. So again, it just goes back to those tightness that you have there, that you build up over time. So my regrets, I could have done some things differently, but not to the point of where I would say, I would just change this and all that kind of stuff or anything. But I mean, obviously there's some things that you would say, I could have done this differently. But I mean, I can say personally that I love Javida more than any other person on this earth. I loved her that much, and she loved me that much. So there was no need for me to have regrets about it.
Don't hand to me, Darrell. So
Oh, right on your face.
don't do it.
Oh, you're red. We're gonna make this picture the thumbnail for the episode.
I think, like I said, you could get into little petty stuff over the time. But I think one of my regrets was I wish I was more patient in bringing her along, even though she would say, you know what, I want to thank you, especially from my spiritual side, that you really. But I push sometimes, and it's kind of my personality. Once I'm convinced that something is right, then I want, especially the people I want them to see it, and I want them to get it, and people just don't come along like I want. And she used to say, "You think everybody think like you." And she was right, but there was a part B to that. There is a right and wrong.
That's true.
There's a right way. There are financial principles. There are principles that are just true. How people receive them in the time span differs from individuals. And I think initially I just wanted her to get it. Like when I started in investments, I had to go with her 401k, and I had to spend like I don't know how long. Okay, you got to get this, because what if something happens? Because my point to her was, what if something happens to me?
Yeah.
You need to know these things. So I could have been more patient, and we got there on some things. Some things the person may not ever get there. Right. So the patience, but it's a regret. But then again, what I was trying to do is better for her. I was trying to help her, which the things that I know that were true.
I know, Waymon, you always said, and it really stuck with me, is when you talked about when you and Paulette was going to buy the house.
Oh yeah.
And you said you guys was on the same page. You know, regardless of what happened, when you're on the same page, things can happen. Since the passing of your spouses, how are you with the kids? You know, how are they? How are they moving along, or how are you guiding them? Because you just said, you know, sometimes you want to bring them along. How was that process?
Well, what? This is for another podcast. Was the kids? I only had one, the daughter,
Right.
and then my grandkids. The grandkids are like, man, I tell you, that's why when Karen grandparents,
Yes.
it's different.
whole different thing.
But obviously, what my daughters she really took it hard.